Anthropic has said that its new Mythos preview is too dangerous for public release. And Secretary Bessent and Chair Powell called in the heads of the major banks to warn them about it.
I applaud Secretary Bessent for doing that. One of the things we always were focused on, the risks to the banking system, the risk for any kind of cyber attack. You're just getting in and change the ones and zeros around in the banking system. So much of it rests on our banking system, so nothing is more important.
We need to do something about it. I don't think there is a framework. You know, everybody is keen to have a framework within which to operate. I don't think there is a governance framework that is there to actually mind those things. We need to work on that.
Catherine Judge is a professor at Columbia Law School specializing in the Fed. She explained the risks that Mythos could pose for the banking system and what regulators can do to manage them.
The big deal is there are real concerns that this new, much more sophisticated form of AI could detect, and likely will detect, very meaningful vulnerabilities in banks' software in ways that could expose them to cyber attacks that would disable individual banks and potentially the broader banking system.
There is the danger of bad actors getting access to it. Is there a flip side to it also, that it may give the banking system and banks some defensive tools others might lack?
Yeah, I mean, this is always the interesting question, is like AI fighting AI, and what does that look like? And there's also a question of what that looks like for the structure of the banking system. Again, the US has always had a very diffuse banking system. We have lots of small banks, we have regional banks, and they provide different types of services and loans to the real economy. And so one of the interesting questions, if this becomes absolutely vital to be part of the financial system, who's going to have access to that type of technology?
The financial system is global, last time I checked. So it's not just a US problem we have here potentially.
Not at all. And we've seen both European and Asian regulators speak out and voice significant concerns. And so one of the things that's so interesting about this is you both need clear public-private coordination, but there's also the possibility of global coordination to try to understand just what these threats are, and then what can be done realistically to try to contain them.
What exactly can the Federal Reserve do? They have an awful lot of PhD economists. I'm not aware they have a lot of AI engineers.
Yeah, I mean, one of the real challenges, no bank supervisor is prepared for this, right? So cyber attacks are nothing new. It's a challenge banks have been dealing with for a long time. And supervisors have played a role helping to make sure that banks are appropriately prepared as part of operational risk and other concerns. But this is a whole different level. It's jumping up the magnitude of the threat in a way that no bank regulator or supervisor is prepared to fully address. And so the question is, can they ask good questions? Can they help provide guidance? As they did in Washington, can they facilitate coordination and conversation?
You turn to the Fed right now to avoid the problem. But if, heaven forbid, there is a problem, there is a serious hack, what could the Fed's role be in remediation?
This is one of the key issues. I mean, the government's not going to be able to stop a serious cyber attack. On the other hand, the government can play a very meaningful role helping to contain the damage. And really, when you're worried about the functioning of the financial system, a lot of it's on prevention, but things are going to happen and things are going to go wrong, and the effort then is on containment. And that's where the Fed having strong relationships with the entire banking system and helping to make sure that it's providing liquidity and potentially helping to provide alternatives for affected consumers, and really coming up with a game plan over, well, what can we do and what should we do if things go wrong, is going to be, I think, part of the effort going forward to try to make sure that in the really unfortunate event that there is a wide-scale malicious attack, that the damage isn't nearly as crippling as the actor might hope.
Like the rest of us, the Fed may be struggling to understand the benefits and risks of AI. So we turn to the experts. People like Margaret Mitchell, researcher and chief ethics scientist at Hugging Face, an open source AI platform.
Mythos is really on the cutting edge of cybersecurity right now. It's incorporating a lot of things that we've already known, that's already common in cybersecurity, but it's within a system, also called Mythos, that can operate warp speed. So there's this new sort of paradigm right now within AI called AI agents and agentic computing. Mythos is an autonomous agentic system. It can take sequences of actions without any human oversight, and it can do it, while you're asleep and infiltrate tons of different systems.
If I'm one of the big banks, the Secretary of Treasury Bessent called in, and I learned about this. What can I do about the big banks have been spending a lot of money on cybersecurity for quite a while now.
Right. I think that knowledge and that expertise is really important here. You don't necessarily need mythos to build up appropriate defenses. And actually, this is where the open source world can really help, because it's quite possible, or at least we sort of think it's possible within the world of AI, to have different models swapped in a similar system built with deep security expertise to help with probing for vulnerabilities and creating patches, that kind of thing. And so I think it's really important right now for people to recognize, A, that this technology is possible and that doesn't have to be siloed to any one company, and B, that you can build up defenses right now using tools that are already available for intruder detection, fuzzing frameworks, these kinds of things, where basically it's possible to preempt any sort of attackers and defensively set up safeguards against any malicious problems.
Part of cybersecurity defense is basically having your own organization or other organizations try to hack into you to see where there might be vulnerabilities. So that's been going on for some time at the banks. But is this different in the sense that it can be running in the background constantly?
The punchline is that Mythos is operating in a way where human oversight can be difficult. And that's because it can create action sequences without any sort of human intervention and act on different kinds of things that it sees as possible. And it can do it very fast, and it can spawn what are called sub-agents, so little workers that can do the same thing across distributed systems. This is all this sort of new paradigm of agentic computing. So, it's really within this calibration of autonomy that I think we have to think critically about what we want these systems to be doing, where we want to bring in human oversight, how people should be able to interact with these systems in order to approve or deny things. Because otherwise, with full autonomy, they can just keep going overnight while you're sleeping, spinning tons of different systems, that sort of thing. So, you have to put in place those guardrails, those checks, in order to make sure that humans are in the loop and can see into the loop, can really understand what's happening.
So you, of course, are an expert in this. Give us your best judgment when you talk about fully autonomous versus semi-autonomous. Which is better if the goal is safety?
Semi-autonomous. I've actually written papers on this and op-eds, and I'm very opinionated about this, actually. So when you have full autonomy, that's super flexible. You can do lots of different things, and so that's pretty cool. Lots of different things you'd never thought of doing. You don't have to pre-program it, right? But from a safety perspective, also within the context of the financial sector, where there's a lot of regulations at play in terms of accountability, in terms of the passage of data, that kind of thing, you want to make sure that you're able to specify specifically the context within which the system can run, and that it can't jump out of those contexts.
If you're a regulator, what do you do in the face of this new technology to try to minimize or prevent systemic risk?
Regulators have one piece to play within the overall accountability chain. And I think that for regulation, that focuses more on trying to help ensure reliability, ensure safety, opening up the possibility of third-party audits, third-party testing. So there's something to be said for companies that share their code, their information, even if they're proprietary, in order to undergo third-party auditing, third-party testing, that kind of thing. Regulators are in a really nice position to try and ensure that people's rights are protected. So what are the rights that should be protected? So this is where security comes in, reliability, safety, privacy, those kinds of things. So I think regulators have a role to play within the overall ecosystem in setting up what kinds of human values should be protected in these systems, and how can you ensure that your system does that? Show us. Run the evaluations, have it undergo third-party evaluations where we can actually see from someone without the financial incentives of one institution how well these systems actually work.